All righty, good evening, everyone. I'm calling the Monday, January 22nd, 2024 Education Operations Committee meeting to order. I am seeking a motion to approve the minutes of December 18th, 2023.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. With that, do we have any speakers? No speakers. Okay. Moving to agenda item number 4. Dr. Fran Finkel of the Wisconsin Association of School Boards will share with the board a presentation on the draft timeline for the superintendent search, as well as review the process that will be used. With that, thank you for being here, Fran.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for having WASB be part of your search process. Just a little bit about me. I am former superintendent in Alaska for 8 years. I was in Alaska for 27 years, middle school principal for 9, curriculum instruction assessment for 10, and then superintendent for 8. Prior to that, I spent 16 years in northwestern Minnesota. I moved down here to get away from the cold and the ice. Right? But that's my background, and I've been with WASB for 5 years, and part of my job is helping school boards in their search process. So that's what I'm doing here tonight at your graces. So what we're going to do, there's not going to be a real presentation because I'm already here, and you're actually in the first stage of planning, and that is to plan your search. So I asked Tabitha to make sure that you had some documents in your enclosures. So we're going to try to, tonight in the next hour, work up a schedule of activities for the search process and also walk through the initial planning, okay? And it's going to be interactive because you all are going to have to make some decisions. So if you would pull out it says WASB Search Service Memorandum, and we're going to work from the top down there, unless anybody has any questions before we start. You good? And just feel free to ask along the way, folks. This is your plan. So the very first thing we do, or the very last thing we do, is we finalize the dates for the search service calendar. And if you take a look at the calendar, this is a draft calendar with some dates that I tried to tie in some Mondays, assuming that you have Monday board meetings. These dates are flexible to the extent that it works with your calendar and it works with my calendar. Otherwise, if you look to where we are tonight, the planning meeting on January 22nd, and if you look to when you would select your final candidate that you'd offer a contract to, more towards the bottom, it's April 11th, 12th in that window. So it's about a 3-month process, but it's tried and proven. So we can talk more about this once we go through some of the information on the initial planning guide, because we need to talk about exactly what you want to be part of this search. WASB's search process it's a stakeholder-driven process. So one of the things that we require, if you're going to work with us, is to have a community survey to get stakeholder information there, and then at least focus groups, at least one focus group. I think we built in 5 into your contracts, or up to 5. So there's going to be some opportunities for you to have smaller groups of people confirm what you hear in the survey, okay? But the survey itself would go out to everybody. The opportunity for that would go out to everybody in the community via invitation on your social media and press releases. And then it would be emailed to your staff and your parents groups, so that we're going to try to cover as many groups and as many people as possible. So the first thing is, if you have any questions on the community survey, we're going to invite people. You have a copy of the questions in a third document that you were given, called Community Survey Questions. You can see there's 7 of them. We look for personal characteristics, and there's options for people to rank order those characteristics. We look for leadership styles, and there's options there, skills, financial expertise, those kinds of things. And then professional expertise also in number 4. Strength of the district, because we want to look to see what, from your stakeholders, what they see the strong parts of Wausau School District are. And then what are the challenges that are in place? Sir?
Is that survey, is that sent out through our, like, we have an email list that we have for most of our stakeholders? Is it sent out that way like most of our surveys are, or is it sent out a different way?
I'm not sure that we're not going to use your Qualtrics if that's what you're asking, but we are going to ask you to email out the link to the survey, and then that link will be on your webpage also and with your social media. So anybody in your community that wants to take it can go to that link and respond.
Is there any sort of identifier that shows that the person taking this is actually a member of our community and a stakeholder that we want to hear from, as opposed to what happened with mascots, which is anyone can click on the link and say whatever they want?
There's no identifier.
Okay.
But if you look to the last question, and it says 11 options, but that's not like that anymore. We typically have 3 options of people identify themselves: community member, staff member, or parent. And if you wanted us to break that community member down a little bit smaller, we could, but those are typically the 3 that we have. So if they're going to go on and not tell the truth, do you have any control over that? Not really. We don't have any control over that. Okay. Have we seen people stuff the superintendent survey box before? Not that we know of. So, okay. Other questions? Good questions.
So it's fairly accurate, you're saying?
It's accurate, and we get a good response rate. I think statistically, what's the response for it to be statistically significant is like 14 or 15%, and we typically get better than that. So, yes, sir. Other questions about the survey? All right, let's keep going then. We're going to try to get it, like I said, we're going to try to get it to as many people as we can, so that the more responses you get, the better information we're going to have to develop a profile of who your next superintendent candidate is. The reason we ask for the community for input, the parents, the staff for input, and the reason we have focus groups, which kind of narrow down and confirm the responses in the survey, is to build a profile for the application that we send out, that we post when it goes live. Okay? So at the end of the day, we're going to have another meeting, and we're going to review the focus group results. We're going to review the survey results. And then when I say focus group results, we're gonna if staff is a focus group that you want to have interviewed, then there will be staff results. There will be administrative results. So you'll see the different stakeholder groups and how they're responding. We're going to ask you all to also be interviewed on these, and you can see the focus group questions in the other document that is in your packet, and it's basically the same questions that you see on the survey. Okay, and that's purposeful. So you're getting the same information no matter what group you're looking to get it from. Questions about that?
Yeah, Fran, just one question. How much variance do you see between communities when you're hiring or when you're out recruiting for a superintendent? I'm just thinking in my day job, if we're out recruiting some executive leader, the profile is 80% the same. Almost all the time. There's a few things that vary once in a while, but generally speaking, you're all kind of looking for the same, person.
We kid, there's this ideal job description that you want to complete, right?
Yeah.
But there's also things that are specific to your district that you want to include in your profile. I mean, especially when you get their results back, when you ask people, what do we need to do better, or what are the challenges of the district, that's where you see the specifics. And it's really interesting for you to be able to see what people believe your strengths are. Now, maybe you survey your community every so many years, or and you have that information, but that's another indicator of what people see is good about your district and what are the challenges that you need to still address.
And what is the date that the posting you say would officially go live in the plan?
We're gonna start advertising this tomorrow.
Okay.
But the actual application won't go live until another week or so, and after the focus groups are over.
Thank you.
You bet. Other questions? Good questions. So number 2 and number 3, that's our way of getting stakeholders involved in creating the profile that we talked about, and also you use that feedback, and we're talking now on number 4, but we'll come back to 3. You use that feedback to create application questions. What I'm going to ask you to do when we review the information from the focus groups and the survey is I'm going to ask you as a board to look for themes. What do you see? What are they saying? What are the themes of what people want in the next superintendent? I mean, you might see somebody, you might see a theme. We need somebody who can build culture, or we need somebody who's very good fiscally. You'll see the themes that'll crop up, but that'll be a task at a meeting where we're gonna ask you all to see if you see the same things that we're pulling out, okay? And so one of the decisions that you have to make is in number 3. If you look at the focus group size, it's 8 to 15, and it takes about an hour to ask these questions. And the reason that the groups are the size that they are is so that everybody in the group will be able to give their input and still have time within that 60-minute frame. So those are there's random ways to determine who those people are. But the question is for you is how many focus groups do you want me to conduct, including yours, and how many, what groups are those?
So that's a big question right now. How many focus groups do we want?
Well, or who, maybe you start with who is it important to ask to validify, if you will, the survey responses that you get.
Well, I think the 4 you have listed there, and then you said 5, so I assume the 5th is probably a parent or community focus group of some sort.
It could be a community group. If you have somebody that you have in mind, when you distribute the survey and get the responses back, you're pretty much hitting your community groups, right?
Right.
But you could verify that if you had a way to choose who those people are, which is sometimes difficult in a larger district, but
I would think we would want those 4 that are listed.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that we can do with professional staff is if you think there's a need, we could have an elementary focus group and a middle high school focus group, because you might get different responses that way. Bearing in mind that these people are probably going to all take your survey too. It's just when you do this, when you answer the survey, you're answering, there's not a lot of, there isn't any input for short answers, right? But the short answers will come in the interview. So if you wanted a elementary and then a middle high school, that could be 5 groups that you'd take care of right there. Would that work for everybody?
Makes sense.
So that's what we're discussing and deciding on, correct? So was that
Right.
an interest to have it broken down like that?
Makes sense.
Because there are definitely different needs at the elementary level from staff members than you are going to see at the middle and high school level.
Right. So that so then once we get done with those focus groups, we will have that report built for you. And if you look on your calendar, we have it scheduled here for the 15th or 19th of February, but I'd bring back a report to the board and it would say, question number 1, here's how all these different groups responded. Question number 2, and so on, and including in that synopsis would be your responses. So board would be the 5th one. That would be just like it's broken down in number 3, and we take all 5 of those groups, and you get responses individual from each. Okay.
And did you say we're going to discuss the process for selecting the professional staff that'll be involved in the focus group? Or how?
Yeah, what I thought was, when you tell me if we need to do it differently, but what I thought is I could work with Tabitha and we could look at a random, what we do is we put a letter out and we invite people to be part of the focus group process. And we tell them that if there's high interest, then we'll do a random drawing of people's names and allow them to, and we let them know when it's going to be so their time, the time works for them and so on. And then that's how we get our 15. It's not, we only want certain people. Let's give everybody
Well, and
a chance.
that's exactly where I'm going with it. I know that there's been some disgruntled people in the past, and I understand there always will be, but there's been some thought that whether it was with restructuring committees or what have you, that there was cherry picking of participants. Yeah. And I want to make sure that we do, and if it ends up on the board shoulders, it ends up on the board shoulders in terms of selecting who the professional staff may be. So I don't know what the rest of you think about that. I don't want to get through this process and hear what we did on restructuring, saying I volunteered, I threw my name in 17 times and I heard nothing back. I want to make sure that we've got the right people in there.
Yeah.
Seems like what he just described, though, would avoid all of that, right? Because we're looking for 15 people, and if
And it goes out to
14
everyone.
volunteer, then it's 14. But if 50 volunteer, it's just randomly picked.
And then, you're right, Karen, it'll go to every one of your staff members. And we can say we're going to have 2 focus groups. One's going to be elementary, one's going to be middle high. If you fall in those categories, and professional staff, if you want to have input, give us your name, and then when we see how many come in, we'll just go through and do it random. I mean, it's like, okay, and you know how that works, the random selection. You look at how many you have, and every so many, that's the name you're going to take, and you offer it to them. But you give them that information ahead of time so that they know that it fits into their schedule, right? We're going to do it at this day, at this time, and if you want to be part, then.
As long as the information has gotten out there early enough so that they can put their name in and then understand that it's going to be random and it's not going to be chosen based on who they are, where they're at, what school they're at, things of that fashion. Truly a random choice.
The letter that we send out through the district will say just that. It's a random process. If more than 15 people are interested, that's how they'll be.
Tabitha, you haven't.
Yeah, I think it's important for the board and everybody to know that when we do a random process, there's a computer-generated process that you can go to called Random Number Generator. We use that. So when they do their survey responses saying, I'm interested, it'll put them into, like on Excel, line 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down. And we will just go into Random Number Generator and say, give me 15 numbers or whatever between this number and that number, and it'll spit out, here are the 15 numbers, and those are the lines that end up coming in and getting invited. So it isn't anything about
She will help with
who
that.
they are, other
I'm
than we
aware
need
of
to
that
know who to
program.
contact.
Yeah, I'm aware of that program. That's a very good program to use.
Yeah.
What we do is we count on your people to help with that selection. Like I don't have a random generator, but we don't.
All right. Jim, maybe we can talk about that afterwards.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
You bet. Somebody asked earlier, do you do this yourself? I think, Jim, you said you do yours. We have a staff of people in both Winneconne and Madison that help me pull the strings and make sure that you're taken care of correctly, just so.
Well, and I asked that only because of the fact that taking how big the district is and how many people we're trying to get involved, it's a big task.
Right, it is a big task. And it's probably, it goes without saying, but it's in my opinion, it's the most important thing school boards do, is hire their district administrator. The most important. Okay, so are we okay with what I have is elementary, middle school professional staff, a support staff, focus group, admin team, and board, correct? 5? Okay. If you look down at stakeholder feedback on number 4, like I said, we create a profile. You get a report. We'll also use your job description, because what we're looking to do is create 3 or 4 application questions that are specific to your school district. And so we're looking for those themes so that we can get people to answer questions that revolve around those themes. And one of the things we ask you to do is, when you're considering questions, is to take a look at your job description. Is it up to date? Is it something that you need to bring up to date? Is what your job description say about your district administrator? Are those the things that are truly important to you? And if they are, should you be asking questions of the candidates about those areas, right? Okay. So, move on to 5. The other thing we do during this process, and I think Sally, our support person back in Madison, has already been in contact with Cassie. We put together a district brochure, and it's based on some of your demographics. It's based on the community. And when that application finally gets posted on the WASB website and all the other places we post it, in there, besides the application and the questions that you are going to generate based on those themes and your stakeholder input, there will be a brochure that advertises your district.
Now, I know this is a big question from a lot of people, probably on the board as well, but community people, when you send information out that we have a vacancy, is that Midwest, national, statewide?
Yeah, it's good. That's a good question. It is statewide. We only place, WASB only places superintendents in Wisconsin. That's why it's kind of a strong answer that you asked us to come in and help. We don't place people in Minnesota. We focus on our people here. So it goes out to 8 different states as part of a organization that WASB belongs to. It's called the National Association of Search Services. And then there's another 16 different universities in Wisconsin, public and private, that it goes out to. It's posted on our website. It's posted on the WASDA, the superintendent's website. And it's on social media. So our social media and that of the E-Connection weekly newsletter that goes out.
Well, and this is new because we moved from the National Association of School Boards to the newer group.
Right.
Are we going to send out to those organizations as well?
You know, I don't know that answer to that. The other, I don't know who else is involved in that, but I can find that out. I can leave this with you.
Okay.
This is where they go now. And if in your search proposal, if you want that to go further, there's other places it can go. You'll just have to let us know when it comes time to posting, and you can take a look at that and review this. It's on page 13 of your proposal. Let me read some of the places to you here.
Right.
If you want this to go, this isn't part of your package, but American Association of School Administrators, AASA. And that's also in Wisconsin. Ed Weekly, if you wanted to go on Ed Weekly in that magazine, Association of Latino Administrator and Superintendents, you could go there. You could go to the National Alliance of Black School Educators Career Center. Those are other places that are over and above the search. If you wanted to specifically focus on those people, you could do that, on those agencies.
Well, and like you said, WASDA does connect with the national, and so they send things out, and that would be picked up nationally as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, and when you look at and you look at the National Association of Superintendent Searches, this is where it goes: Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Connecticut, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, I'm just going down the list, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, South Dakota, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming.
So the 5 states not mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
The reason I'm pursuing this is because this has been something that's been asked of me by several community members that want to know, is this just going to be statewide or is this going to be out there?
No, it's out there.
I don't mean to belabor it.
It's okay. It's okay. It's a good question. People want to know how far do we reach, right? And that's the answer. Okay, are we ready? What we do, like I said, I'm on number 5 now on page 2. What we do is we post this early. We'll post it tomorrow. We'll say there's a superintendent position open with the Wausau School District and so on. And then once we're done with our focus group conversation, the themes, the questions are generated, then there's an online application, okay? With the brochure, with the profile of the superintendent that you're looking for based on your stakeholder input, and then the questions that you generated through the process. And that will be posted for about a month, okay? And if you look on your search service draft calendar, if all things go great, February 22nd is when we would post it, and March 22nd is when it would close.
And I believe, Deanna, Ms. White, we already have somewhere on the website ready to go. It's not live yet, but with all the information ready to go.
Yep, we can have that go live tomorrow as well.
Okay. The coordination of this, I think, is very important, that when it goes out in all aspects. And I like what you're saying, Fran, talking about getting things together here so that we're ready to go. I know that Anna was working on this before Christmas, getting that website ready to go. So
what we do is we have a press release that goes out that announces the opening, and it also gets sent out to your parents and your staff so that they're kind of firsthand knowledge of what you're doing. And it also announces the survey in that press release. So it goes out to all your media, lets people know ahead of time. Survey's out there, staff and parents get it. So we'll have to coordinate that with what you do so that we're all on the same page. And we have the link ready to share with the district when it's ready to go up on your website. Okay? Okay. So the question number 5, and it's an online process. The application is an online process. The question number 5 is, how do you handle internal candidates? Because chances are the district your size, you might have somebody from inside that might want the job. So, and that's the question to you all. You can treat internal candidates like you treat any other candidate. They go through the same application process. There's no priorities in terms of skipping through the first round of interviews and go right into the final. Or you could grant them a final interview, or you could grant them an initial interview because they're a district employee or for whatever reason you want to use. So those are questions that you have to answer so that we know how to handle applicants that come in from inside the district.
So, before we come up with that decision, one of the things that you was shared in that informational session this past week was sort of some of the controversy that happens that way, and it might be good to just demonstrate what are the pros and cons of either
Sure.
one's, going either direction
Sure.
with that, how that impacts then external candidate interest.
Yes, good. Did you want to help with
No,
that
you
or
can
no?
go ahead.
Okay.
You're-
So what are the pros and cons of internal candidates being moved right into the final round? The pros are if you have some type of a succession plan in place, or you've been thinking about a successor when Dr. Hiltz retires, if you've been thinking about that and you've been grooming this person into that position, and you like what's going on in the district and you think we don't want this to change at all, then some districts they don't even have a search. They just grant the opening to somebody who's the next person that's ready, right? But there's also that transparency issue or a good old boy appointment issue that comes with appointing somebody who's from internal. How am I doing so far? Yeah. And I will tell you that this is my story, but when I had spent 19 years in Onalaska and my superintendent asked the board if they would just move me into the position, and the board said, you know what, we really like what's going on, but we want to be transparent, so he can apply, and if he gets it, we hope he does, but if he doesn't get it, then somebody better is going to come in, right? So that's the other side of that. Not only the transparency, but allowing yourself to choose the best person that's a match for your district. So there's good, there's bad, but it's your decision. So that's kind of where we're at.
Is that a decision that we need to make tonight, or is that a decision that we can address once we see who the candidates are, both internal and external?
Well, you're not going to know who the candidates are internal. Yeah, you can wait until that if you want, but you won't know until, if this thing closes on March 22nd, you will know at midnight on March 23rd, you'll be able to access the applications. You're all going to get you have your WASB login and password, and if you don't, we'll help you redo that. But you'll be able to access all of those applications at your leisure once that application window closes. So
I think one of the other things that you had mentioned, certainly the interest of transparency, but also that when external candidates maybe are made aware that there's an internal interest,
right.
they don't throw their hat in the ring. And we may have fewer applicants to choose from because, the word gets out that there's internal candidates, which really limits potential candidate options. So, I think that's another significant drawback as well.
Yes, absolutely. We do not tell people who applies. That's one of the reasons why when you use a consultant, it's a good thing, because that's all confidential, that's kept, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about tonight. When you see this material, it's all confidential, and people count on that, right? You would not get good candidates to apply if they knew their name was going to be out there in the first round. You wouldn't. People just, they want to dip their toe in the water, but if they know that their board's going to find out that they applied for a job in Wausau, then their board might say, well, either sweeten the pot or hit the road, one or the other. So they're very cautious when they apply because they count on that confidentiality piece. But Karen's right. It's people talk, applicants talk. We don't let that go. We ask you not to let that out once you know. But some people won't, if they think that there's a good internal candidate that they might not be able to be better, then they won't apply.
Good question.
Okay. All right, so do you want to wait until later, until you see who the applicants are? Do you wanna
The
decide now?
concern that I have is I don't like the idea of just moving somebody to the final. What I also want to avoid, though, is I want to avoid us not even finding out that somebody that we really highly think of didn't make it to us because it got excluded, like before we even found out that they applied. You know, it's that middle ground area that that I want to avoid.
Okay, just so you know, and we're kind of jumping a little bit, but it's a good segue. We do not screen your applicants. We will help you screen your applicants, but we're not the consulting firm that's going to say, here's your best 6, right? We're going to sit down with you and we're going to do pros and cons, and you're going to be able to evaluate each one of those candidates based on a tool that we use, so that you're comparing apples to apples on each candidate. And then you guys will be able to have your conversation. I'll be there, and it's like, who do we like? Who do we want to bring in as our top people?
So what you're saying is we'll see all of, any application that comes, okay.
Everyone.
So also, it would prevent, if there's more than one internal candidate that finds out, you know, if it's all confidential, then hopefully we'll get every internal candidate that's interested versus, oh, well, I heard so-and-so is interested, so I'm not going to do that, you know, to avoid whatever. So it seems to me like a better route to go,
Works for me.
so.
I'm okay with that. I'm seeing people nodding their heads. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that you, or at least partially hearing, that you don't want to move somebody right into the finals. You want to put them in the mix with everybody else. Okay, good.
Yep.
That was a good observation, because some search firms say, you hired us to give you the best candidates. You don't get to see them all. We'll choose your best ones. And that's not how it works, because you know who's best for you, right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so part of the information that we give you is in number 6. You're going to get a resource guide, and it's going to help develop first round interview questions, second round interview questions. It'll help you when you develop those. It'll talk about how to do reference checks. It'll also have your athletic conference and your CISA and like school district size salary comparison. So you will get the salary benefit package. That'll be part of that resource guide. And that will come right before, a little bit before we sit down and have that first meeting to review applications. So you'll have all of that. Okay. Candidate information, we talked a little bit about this in the segue. Electronic application that you will get on the day after it closes. The importance of confidentiality, the scoring tool that will help things be the same, or it'll be a common way to evaluate each applicant. How many applications to expect? One of the things that's new, more so in the last couple of years, is you have superintendent candidates that shop districts. Before they apply, they check you out, right? They're doing, as soon as you get the application list, you're going to start Googling who are these people, right? Even though it'll be way more than what's in their application process, but you want to know about them. They're doing the same thing about you. And it depends on what their history is. This year, more than ever since before COVID, our applications have been way up. 10, 15, 20 for openings, and not necessarily larger district openings. So, you know, there's no way to tell. There's no crystal ball in terms of how many you're going to get. But we're more and more, as we move into this season of superintendent searches, we're more and more pleased with the number of applicants that are, and not only the number, but the quality. We've done a number of searches already that are almost in completion. And out of the 3 that we talked about when we were in Milwaukee last week, over half of the applicants were people who were actually superintendents in a job looking for another challenge. So sometimes you get people that they're qualified, but they're certified, but they don't have any background. Sometimes you get people that are looking to go into a larger district. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons people would want to come here. The location, I mean, there's lots of reasons why people would want to come. Reasons people don't want to come in a lot of times is there, what's the quality of life where we're going? Is there housing that's going to be available, childcare, all those things? Is my spouse going to be able to find a job when we relocate? I mean, those types of things are what they ask. But you've got all those things here, right? Some districts do not. Okay, we're on 7. When we start with the, if you look back over at the calendar, or the draft calendar, when we meet to review the focus group results and so on in February, we're going to ask you to start looking at developing a set of first round application questions. Every applicant that you interview will answer the same questions during the first round. It's typically 15 or so questions. And you're going to your scoring tool that you'll have during those interviews will be so that you can compare, again, apples to apples. I will be part of that first round of interviews. Typically, people bring in 6 candidates. If you have 6 quality candidates and it's 3 interviews over 2 different nights back to back, we do all the scheduling, we'll do all the inviting, we'll talk to people who don't get chosen for the final interview, we'll make all the contact for you, so as part of the process, okay? So typically, I guess I jumped down to 9, but you're going to finalize, I think with Tabitha's help too, you're going to finalize what those questions are in number 8. And how you do that is you go back to the profile, the job description, what you said was important in a superintendent, and you look for questions that revolve around that. Maybe there's a finance question. Maybe there's an interpersonal relationship question. Maybe there's a curriculum type question. Whatever you say is important in your profile, that's what your questions would revolve around. Okay? So we have 2 evenings for the first round. I'll be there with you. There's typically 15 questions. I said that. Part of the process of the interview is the candidate has to make sure that they have time to answer all the questions. And we'll give them a copy of the questions in front of them, and we'll say, here they are. And that's in case they don't hear or clearly or whatever. It's in front of them, so they don't have to guess what you asked, right? And then see how they bide their time as well as how they give their answers. So we'll talk about the interview process where it says orientation. We'll talk about that beforehand. Typically, the board president greets people and you take turns asking questions. But you will have all of that background material, the application, the resume, their letters of reference. You'll have all of that in front of you that night. So if you ever want to delve into some of that material after you get done with your interviews, you'll be able to do that. So we'll have my contact during the search, I understand, is Tabitha, but then we'll greet the people. We'll have to identify a greeter the nights of the interviews. And then after the second interview, you'll choose your finalists. And you typically do it the same night. You sat through 3, you're going to sit through 3 more. You figure out who you want to bring back, okay? Typically it's 3. We had a district last week that had 4. We've had districts that just brought in 2. It just depends on the pool and what you like, okay? Questions about that? Once you choose your 3 finalists, then we'll do a background check. WSB will do a background check, and it'll be a financial, a criminal, and educational background check. So when Dr. So-and-so comes in and says they got their degree at a certain place, we'll be able to verify that that's happened. That more than once it's happened that they don't. Are you, Pat, familiar with that? Have you experienced that? Yeah, you're right. They say they have some degree and they don't, and so, but we'll verify all of that. And then in between the first and second round of interviews is when typically the school board members conduct reference checks. Now, you may want your HR department to help with that, but if you want to be involved in that, that's something you can decide after the first round of interviews. And we'll help you with the questions so that you're not asking things that you shouldn't be asking, if you want to do it yourself. And if you decide to do it yourself as board members, we'll make sure that one or two of you are assigned to each candidate so there's no redundancy. And, Jim's calling somebody and Lance is calling the same person and Jennifer, so there's no overlap. We'll make sure that there's a method to the madness.
Well, one thing I do like what you just said was you'll create the questions for calling the reference people so
Right.
that we don't step in a cow pie or anything.
In part of your resource guide, and this is what it looks like. Part of your resource guide, one of the chapters is on making reference checks. And so it gives you a list of questions that have been generated for past searches, and you can decide which ones of those that you want to ask. Okay, other questions about that? Okay, so we're on number 12. We're going to our second interview. We'll call the three finalists. We'll set up the interview nights, the interview times, I should say. The format, and we'll have a press release saying, here's the three finalists that were identified by your president in a press release as to being finalists, and that they're going to have their final interview on whatever night it is that we decide in this calendar, so that your community members know who your finalists are. And you'll have to decide if that night you have your final interviews, the format that you want to use. Do you want to have a community forum where people could come in and listen to them answer questions that were generated by staff, parents, community members? You want to have that or not? You want your administrative team to be part of the interview, or a portion of your administrative team to be part of the interview, or not? You want it just to be the board? Because typically in the first round, it's just the board, okay? You guys, all men and women, get to choose who your finalists are. And then you open it up and you say, okay, admin, we'd like your input on these three. Okay, community members, we've got some questions we're gonna generate, and the consultant or Tabitha would be the one who would ask the questions, and people would come to your auditorium and they'd listen to, they would listen to how people respond. And then we'd actually let them, if you wanted, you could let them rank how they answered each question. There's a way to set up a QR code, right? So 5-point rubric, they did really well, they didn't do well at all. And then you'd have that generated by the time the interviews are over that night.
Stepping back just a little bit, when we choose the 6 candidates to be brought in for interviews, it is at that time we still want to be very confidential about who these 6 people are, so that doesn't go back to their own districts and things of that fashion. But once the 3 have been decided, if that's what we choose, to have 3 or 2 or whatever the case might be, now that can be announced through the media.
Right, and that's what I said. That's where the press release goes out, not only announcing who your finalists are, but inviting them to be part of a community forum if you want that to be part of your final interviews. And we do that all in one, and we do it in one fell swoop, and we also will send it directly to your staff and your parents so that they know up front.
And I think I'm glad you mentioned 3 or 2 or 4 or whatever it is, because when we get to that point, it'll be very important that we not put anybody as a finalist that we don't think has a legitimate chance, because they have the right to stay confidential then, and there's no reason to put anybody through that. If we're like, no, we know it's between these 2, we definitely don't want to have 3 just to have 3.
Right. And I would agree with that about 99%. There's always that 1% where you bring somebody in after the first interview and you go, oh, I'm not sure about this one, and then they become a rock star in the second interview, right? And vice versa. Somebody you think is the best one of the group, and then they don't do very well in the second. So there's always that. But you're right. Don't waste your time. Don't waste their time.
And that kind of goes along with too. One of the, I think one of the red flags could be in the last phase that you were talking about, when there's the final 2 or 3, bringing in staff and bringing in community and all that stuff. In theory, that's done already in those focus groups when we're getting their feedback on what it is that we're looking for. And I think that there can be a bit of a danger in terms of asking for feedback in that forum where people think it's going to be a consensus vote, at that point in time. And I've heard of incident, people start talking, well, the majority of the crowd wanted Jim,
Right.
And then the board selects Judy or, whatever it is. So
Sure.
I just think that at some point we have to take the feedback that we have. We have to use the interview process. We're elected to represent everybody anyways, and then it falls on our shoulders ultimately.
Good point.
We would not set you up for failure by allowing the community people or the admin, if you had an admin group, to believe that they get a vote.
No,
Right.
Understood.
Or a
Whether you set
ranking
them up for
even.
that, either
Right.
people will walk out thinking that they had a vote.
Sure, yeah, but, and that's, that could happen. We try that not to happen. We try not to have that happen because the response, if you had an admin team that was part of that interview, that second round of interviews, you would ask them, what are the strengths of the candidate and what are your concerns about the candidate? Mm-hmm. And that's all you'd want to know. And you typically what happens is after the third interview is you bring your team, your admin team in, and you say to each person that was around the table, let's talk about candidate 1. What did you think the strengths were? And then go through your team. And then what do you think the downside of that person was? And then you go to the next person, you thank them, they leave there's cards that they can fill out that talk about strengths and concerns. They leave those with you, we reinforce the confidentiality piece because their part of the interview is closed session also if you decide to have that. Your interview is closed session, their interview is closed session, and then the forum would be, of course, open. But so they've got a commitment to confidentiality and it seems to work out well. When it doesn't work out, Pat, is when for whatever reason they want to come in and say, well, we all talked on our way in, and here's the one, and I've had that happen once, and the board president said, nope, that's not where we're going. You guys want to give us input or not? And they did, and they kind of backed off, but it's not a vote. I mean, only you can vote for a superintendent to be hired, so.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and I think maybe the part that made you think of that, because it made me think of it, is when you talked about perhaps they filled out something where they kind of ranked the answers to questions, and that's the part that would worry me. Having the community hear the answers to the questions, that makes sense, and all of our meetings are filmed and live, so that would certainly be easy. We could even advertise it that, hey, you might want to tune in tonight, you're going to see answers to questions.
So when, and it's up to you, again, this is your search, right? But if you bring in an admin representative group, they ask the same questions of all 3 candidates, and it's a representative group of, this is one of these people is going to be our next leader, right? So it's like a courtesy to those people too, that you're going to trust them to give you feedback on who might be their next superintendent, their next leader. So it's up to you, but you don't have to decide that tonight, how you want to have that final. But we'll talk about it early into the process to see how much outside involvement you want and if you want any administrative involvement at all. Okay? Other questions?
Any questions on this side?
It is, and I'll tell you why. You're valuing their input, right? They've given you their input in a survey, so you were able to create your profile and your application question and so on. But now they're going to get to see that person, on the hot seat, if you will, right? And what we would do if you want to do this, is we would generate questions, ask parents, community members, staff members to give us questions that they would like to see asked. We'll dwindle them down some way, might be the president and myself, it might be Tabitha who's doing this, but we'll dwindle them down in some way so that it covers all the areas of, say, your job description or what you saw that they wanted in the profile. And then to give them an opportunity to listen to those questions being answered, and then to give you some feedback. It's another way to get your stakeholders involved in what's a really important process. Make sense? Okay. Other questions? Okay, so once you have to decide, you don't have to do it tonight, but in the middle of number 12, you have to decide how you want to have your final interview. And if you are going to have an administrative group, the board group, and a community forum, and you brought in 3 people, you'd run a round robin, everybody'd be there for the first interview, and then they would just rotate groups. And then after that was over, you'd sit down with your admin team. Like I said, they'd give you feedback. You would thank them, and then you could do one of 2 ways when you deliberate on who you want to be your final person. You can do it the same night, okay? Might be 10 o'clock, it might be later than that, depending on when you start your interviews. Or you could come back the next night after you've sat on things for a while. You had a chance to see what the community input was. You had a chance to digest some things. We built into this calendar 2 nights so that you would have your final interview one night, and then you'd come back the next night and you'd do your selection, but you don't have to do that. It might be, we put that in there so when you advertise the closed session night 1, you'd advertise closed session the second night in a row. And if you didn't need that second meeting because somebody just rose to the top and everybody felt the same way, then you made a decision after the final round of interviews, then you don't have to come back the next night. But we'll build it in case you want to come back and have time to see what people said in your forum, if you have your forum, okay? Trying to plan ahead for what we haven't decided yet a little bit. And during this process, when we have our first meeting to talk about applications and focus group results and so on back in February, you're starting to build the contract for your next superintendent, so that the night of the final decision, you're able to call that person and say, we want to offer you the contract. You've already got it, in essence, what you think is the right thing to offer them. And typically you email them a copy of the contract proposal the next day, and then you've got a week or so to negotiate. Okay? You have HR to help with that. But like I said, when you get your resource guide from us, you'll have all salary comparisons, and some night after a regular meeting, you go into closed session, you can talk about what contract's gonna look like for the next soup, right? Okay. And then we follow up after you made your final decision. We follow up. We'll call the people who didn't get the job. We will let them know. There'll be a press release who you chose. It basically will say, pending approval at the next board meeting, this is the person that you're going to recommend for hire. And then part of the contract with WASB is, if you want me to come in with the new superintendent and the board and talk about transition from where you are now and what do you expect in the new superintendent, I'd be willing to facilitate that. That's part of your contract, whether you use it or not, it's up to you. The other part of your contract is you get a 3-year superintendent evaluation tool. You get the tool to use for 3 years without cost, and it's a consensus-driven one evaluation from the board creates one evaluation from all 7 of you, and it's based on continuous improvement of the superintendent. And if the person's a first-year superintendent in your district, or if they're a veteran person, it's based on the national school administrative standards as well as your job description. So we can do more with that when it gets closer to that, but I would do the training with you, and that's all part of your contract. You don't pay more for that. It's just like, if you come with us, this is what you get. So
It's part of the deal.
it's part of the deal. But if you don't want it, it's not subtracted from the deal, I guess is what I'm saying, right? So, and there's also the search guarantee. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it is in your proposal. And what it says is if there wasn't a good match for a lot of different reasons within the first 2 years, not if somebody's had to leave because of a family thing, but it explains it in your contract that we will do another search just for cost, and we'll do that so it'll cost you half as much or even less.
So in other words, a warranty for all practical purposes.
Yes, sir. Search guarantee is what it's called. So, questions? What am I missing here?
Anything from Cody? Do you have any questions? No. Karen? Pat? Lance?
Does it make sense?
Yeah, good time estimate too. Yes, go.
Is it an hour?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, that time estimate, yes. Can we talk about the timeline a little bit? Because I
That's
noticed.
exactly where we're segueing into.
Great. I just wanted to bring it to everybody's attention that the review of applications, choose interviewees and questions is March 25th, spring break. So just,
Yeah, so
I
why
just
don't
wanted
we
you
walk
guys to
through
know
these
that.
and make sure that they work for all of you. Take out
We
your-
said the same thing over on this end, Cassie, so,
Thank you
Thanks.
for bringing that up. Yes, I think many of us have.
right. So
plans.
one of the questions I would ask about this timeline, because I know the application typically is open for a month,
right?
is it's probably going to be difficult to move that February 22nd much earlier, because in order to build that application, we have to have the focus groups completed,
Right.
right? But is there any way the deadline could be, midweek, and then we could do the review of the applications like Thursday of that week?
Yeah,
You
so
know.
what day are you proposing?
Not
guess.
during spring break.
Right, so more like the review of the application March 21st? Which would need to move the deadline then.
Yeah, I can't do the 21st. I can't do the 21st. I can't do the 20th or the 21st.
What does the 22nd look like for everybody?
When is your spring break?
It starts, the 22nd is the last day of school.
The 22nd is,
Right,
so
so
you're
then
gone
the
the
whole
next
following week, yeah.
Yeah.
Not good for me.
Me either.
we are meeting already on March 18th. We just bump it up a week because of spring
Is
break.
that too early, or could we do it that night?
If it closed, we could close it earlier if you don't want to do them.
March 15th or whatever that Friday is, and then
Yeah, we could do that if you only want a 3-week window. You think 3 weeks is enough?
That's a better question for you. Do you think 3 weeks is enough?
You're going to have 2 types of applicants. You're going to have the person that's going to get stuff in right away, And then you're gonna get people that put things in the last 2 days because they wait till the last minute, so.
And you know what? There's other districts that have already started this process, so really that deadline is not probably out of the ordinary to have it on the 18th.
Yeah, we can, like I said, we can do whatever you want.
What did we say, the 15th?
If we close it
Anyone
on
that's-
the,
I mean, anybody that's seriously interested, if 3 weeks isn't enough, then they probably need to go to a different district.
we could close it on the 15th of March, is that what you're thinking? Yeah, okay. And then we move the next meeting from March 25th to yep, we can do that. March 25 goes to March 18. Anything else that conflicts? Do you want to have the first round interviews, first and second work for everybody? April?
Well, that's the biggest thing, consensus, because I'm gonna be missing that no matter what. The last 2.5 weeks of March. I'm gone. So,
Will you be back for the first and second?
yes.
Me too.
Question is, could that be moved to the middle of the week?
Yeah, I can't do the 3rd or the 4th.
When does the new board get sworn in?
The new board is sworn in on April 22nd. Well, they need to be sworn in before April 22nd. They take their seat on the 22nd.
The most critical date is that you're all here for the final round of interviews, right? If one of you misses the first round, one of the first round nights, it's hard for that person to say who they think the best 3 are because you missed half of them, right? But if the more critical is, you're still gonna have read all of the applicants, you're still gonna have an opinion on paper who these people are. The critical date is the 10th, 11th, or 12th, whatever dates you decide there.
I think March is just a tough time because of the breaks.
Yeah.
But do you have everything else for April?
I think April pretty much is solid.
So April 1 and 2, we leave there, and then what about the 10th, 11th, or 10th or 11th, or 11th and 12th, or how do you want it to work for the final? That's a Wednesday, Thursday, 10th, 11th, right? Because the 12th is a Friday, you don't want to come back on a Friday. Okay. So there will be homework for you, not tonight, but there will be homework for you in that, and I'll work with Tabitha to schedule these focus groups that week of the 29th through the February 8th of, I'm sorry, the 5th or the 6th or 8th of February. But the homework will be taking a look at the questions that are out there and trying to determine what those 15 first round questions are going to look like. What can you all agree on? At the very least, what areas do you want them to be in? And we can give you some options as to what questions are out there for the areas that you want to ask the people about. Okay.
That would be based on the surveys.
Pretty much.
We would be able to see that, get them to start organizing.
Right, and so when we meet on the 15th, did we decide if it's the 15th or the 19th of February for that first meeting? 15th is a Thursday, 19th is a Monday. What helps you better? Monday's President's Day. 19th is better.
15th is fine.
How about the rest?
Coming up with application questions? That week?
It's when you look to see what people said in the focus group responses, the survey responses, and we're gonna start talking about the application questions, yeah.
So Pat, for you to do better on the 15th.
Yeah, that I can next week.
15?
It's a Monday. We usually meet on Mondays.
Right, so I'm here on the 19th, but not the 15th, so it doesn't matter, whatever.
Same.
You're on the 19th, but not the 15th? Okay. Yep.
I can go either way, so.
And I should be fine as well.
Sounds
Either
like
one.
Monday's better, so Monday would be the 19th.
Monday the 19th?
Am I correct?
Yes.
Oh, either.
For you all though, it's the 19th, right?
Karen and
Okay,
There is no school that day, just so everybody knows
You're once.
as well.
February 19th. Is that a regular board meeting? Do you get meet twice a month?
And you two can't make it on the 15th,
Right.
but the 19th was no Pat.
So do the 19th.
Well, the thing is, I've got one meeting down in Madison on the 19th too, so could be both of us missing. 19th works for.
I'm good either day.
So we're gonna miss two no matter what, so. I mean, we got 7 other people.
Well, okay, so what about,
And did you say the 19th for yourself was not gonna work?
no, I'm good. February 19th. What about the 14th? That's Valentine's Day. Do you want to spend your Valentine's Day at a meeting? Nope. Okay. That'd be a no? Okay. So what's your pleasure?
What are you good with?
Not the 14th.
Not the 14th?
No.
15th then?
15?
Yeah, myself.
Okay.
For the 15th,
Yeah, we're not there for the 15th.
so.
Which is fine, that's still fine.
As long as we have 7 one way or the other.
Yeah, why not? I mean, I feel like we're just, I think that's fine. Keep it
Okay,
the
then let's go
15th.
with 15th.
Yeah.
15th? Okay.
Thank you. And Kuwait.
Absolutely.
Okay, all the other dates work, right? We said, okay. So let's just go down that one more time. We've got, tonight is the 22nd. The vacancy is posted in a couple days. The press release also will coordinate those two things so that your web page announces it the same way. The survey will go out on the 29th. Focus groups, that'll be something that we take care of internally. Your focus group, the board focus group, you can do it one of two ways. You can sit down virtually with me and answer questions, these questions that you have individually, or you can write out your answers and submit them to me, and I'll just compile them and make them part of the report anyway. One way, it causes you to have another meeting with me face-to-face or virtually. The other way is you get to take some time to think about each one and turn it in, but you're not doing it collectively. So what would you like to do there?
For me personally, I'd rather have a discussion with you.
Okay,
That's just me. I'm not going to object strongly if people would rather do written stuff, but rather have the discussion.
group. Okay, so we'll work on scheduling that. Okay. All right, I think we're good. Questions that you have for me, anybody? I said to your president, I said, this is gonna be fun. And he's not sure if it's fun, but it's certainly, I think you're gonna enjoy it. If you've done it before, you know that it's somewhat stressful, but it's also
I might use some other synonyms versus.
exciting. How about exciting? Thank you for having me, and you have my card if you have any questions, if you want to email me anything.
And I would say if there are any questions from board members for Pat, go ahead and Fran, go ahead and. I just didn't want to put you on the hot seat there, Pat. I'm looking at you and I say, man. So anyway, the bottom line is, feel free to contact Fran if you have questions. That does not have to go through me or anything like that. Directly to you. That's why we brought you on board.
And if I send out something, I will send it out to everybody so that you all.
Good. So every question will be answered for all of us.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All righty. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 5. Annually, a 3-year capital improvement plan is submitted to the Board of Education for approval. Ryan Romansky, Director of Buildings and Grounds, will review notable projects recently completed as well as the effect of alternate funding sources to provide context for the upcoming planned capital improvements. Projects planned for 2024-2025 are provided on the final page. Administration recommends the Committee of the Whole approve the 24-25 capital projects and the corresponding budget. So with that, turning it over to you.
Good evening, everybody. We're here tonight, obviously, to present the 2024-2025 capital budget. The information that Cassie has up and your packets have looks familiar than they did in the past, and that's because we kept the same format as in the past. We bring the capital budget for your approval in advance to other budgets in the district due to the need to solicit bids, prepare for projects, and these projects are mostly done in the summer. So for those of you that haven't seen this layout from previous years, pages 3 and 4 contain information pertaining to the rationale for scheduling projects. If you look on page 3, the capital budget has remained constant at the $1,008,400 as it has in the past 10 years. Despite increasing costs for labor and supplies. So if you go to, Cassie, could you go to page 5, please? So I'm not going to go through all of them, but starting on page 5 through page 28, this contains the historical information for each school, outlining, the more significant improvements completed over the years, I believe starting in 1991. And then if we move forward to page 29. 29 is the 3-year capital needs cover sheet. Comes from a larger workbook containing anticipated capital needs over the next 10 years. Most of the information is based on anticipated life of given building components through the implementation of our preventative maintenance program and some other sources that we have. This is adjusted annually based on repairs, replacements, or premature failure. So if you look up on the top, the left column on the top, as you can see, our anticipated need for 24-25 is $3,413,000. As a small part of the necessary reductions to get to that 1 million $8,400. We will accomplish some of that by using the Q1 funds from a previous referendum. The remaining deductions will result in projects being postponed until future years, increased budgets, or potential referendum funding. Projects will be focused on locations that represent the least likelihood to result in stranded investments. So in other words, we're taking into consideration where the district is looking to go, and we want to make sure we spend our money properly. One other note I wanted to point out is the major increase in capital needs for anticipated capital need in the future. That's in year 25, 26, and 26, 27. These are noted as important reference since we're going to have an ongoing roof and HVAC replacement needs as we go forward in the future. Remember, this is a 10-year capital outlook, so we have to start accounting for those. So I will continue to add those on as we move forward. And finally, historically, we avoided naming specific projects for our capital plan, basically to give us the flexibility to handle unforeseen issues such as weather-related damage or premature failures. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If you stump me, that's why Mr. Bagut is next on my left. So,
Any questions from the board? If not, I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full Board of Education the approval of the 2024-2025 capital projects and the corresponding budget.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 6, Assistant Superintendent Josh Bagut is presenting a summary report representing all legal counsel expenses incurred during the second quarter of the 2023-2024 school year. The report is broken down by law firm and by the type of legal advice sought. This is a written report that requires no action.
Thank you. I'd just like to note that the top box is the just this quarter, so second quarter of the school year, and then the bottom box is the year-to-date total. You'll notice that the first quarter was significantly more than the second quarter. We had about $30,000 this quarter. I'd also like to note that the total budget for this is about $90,000. So we're halfway through the year and we're already at our budget for this allotment. So take that into account next year when we update the budget.
Okay.
Any questions on this?
No questions? Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item number 7. Ms. White will present the proposed 2024-2025 district calendar. Thank you, Diana.
Good evening, board members. So it is that time of the year when I bring next year's school calendar to you. And before we really get into some of the changes that you'll see, it's important to highlight and really celebrate that this calendar is really driven by feedback from our staff and feedback from our family. So I would like to thank everybody who has reached out, whether it's over the phone, over email, and surveys. We sincerely appreciate the feedback. And if someone's at home listening and thinking to themselves, I have a thought, I want them to feel like and know that they can reach out, and we will seriously take their feedback into consideration. Also important to note, the calendar that we're presenting to you does meet DPI instructional minute requirements. And that's something that's really important when we plan each calendar, knowing that we have a lot of staff who live in other school districts. We want to make sure that key dates, spring break, winter break, those kinds of things align. And this calendar very much does that, just to name a few: Merrill, Mosinee, and DC Everest. So now the conversation is about what's new. While the calendar all in all is fairly similar to previous years, one thing to note is this current school year is the first year that we've done independent learning days. And as a refresher, those days are designed for our staff to participate in professional development, and then our students participate in learning from home. And knowing this is something that we really hadn't done before, we wanted to get some feedback to see what is working. Do we like those days? Do we not? Where could we improve? And when we looked at the staff feedback, overwhelmingly, they were really glad to have these added days for collaboration and professional development. And then when we looked at families, they were a little bit more split. Some of the biggest highlights in the feedback we heard was childcare was an issue, as is any day that there is not school in session. And then we heard have the independent learning days, but maybe just make them professional development days. Don't have the learning at home component, because it is one more thing for families to plan for. So this calendar takes the independent learning days and turns them into just professional learning or professional development days, excuse me. In order to do that, though, and meet instructional minutes, we're okay at the elementary level, but at the secondary level, we would be short. So we looked at how do we make up for that time? We could add on to the end of the school year. Historically, when we think of the feedback we've gotten to date, we've heard from families and staff that that's not really the ideal way to go. So then we looked at adding minutes to the day, and what would that look like? So before we had the conversation, we really wanted to bring our busing company First Student into that to understand busing routes and the timing. So in the feedback we received from them, they said one thing that would be important to think about is that to add those 4 minutes to the morning only. And by doing so, it's the least impact on busing routes. Right now, our students who ride yellow buses do arrive to school in time. So if the bell schedule started 4 minutes earlier at the secondary level, they would be okay, barring any sort of issue that may arise in the morning, maybe slippery roads, things like that. But all in all, they get to school in plenty of time and would arrive and begin the school day 4 minutes earlier than this year. So then if we go to the next slide, here is what
That's a question about that, Dan. Is homeroom minutes, do they count as instructional minutes?
Yeah, so it's when the morning bell rings and any kind of instruction begins. So at the secondary level, when that incoming bell rings, that's when we begin counting instructional minutes.
Okay. So shortening homeroom doesn't buy us 4 minutes because it's already in there.
Correct.
All right.
Okay. So here's what that calendar looks like. Just a couple of notes. Graduation dates are still being finalized. We hope to have those ready for you at the next regular board meeting in February. And then I just want to point out, in looking at the calendar, we found a little error, and it's just in January 17th. You see a green box. That should be a yellow box. Same with March 21st. So we'll get those changed right away and uploaded so they are correct. But a few highlights with this calendar. We start the school year after Labor Day, and then we end the first week in June. That Thursday would be the last day of classes, and then Friday would be the last day for staff. We still continue to do the afternoon parent-teacher conferences in October. That is noted on October 23rd. So those are some of the highlights, and you can see the September 27th day. That is a traditional professional learning day. This year it would have been that independent learning day. So there are 2 days where it's just the professional learning, not learning from home students.
Diane, I think one thing that's going to be important to remember is graduation dates. I mean, this is the first year that we're doing the 2-on-1 day.
Yeah.
I think depending on the feedback that we get from that is going to
Drive.
influence what we do next year. I've heard a lot on both sides of it, so
Okay.
I'll be interested to see how it actually gets pulled off.
Okay, great thing to think about for sure. Thank you.
I have a question on one of the days. There's a day off in April, and I'm wondering what that's for and if it needs to be in April, and wondering if not, would it be better served to be on that Friday before spring break? And I ask because we have so many traveling families, including our staff, and I would suspect that we probably have a drop in attendance on the Friday before spring break anyway.
Correct.
So if we're going to have a day off of school, it would seem to make sense to try to pick one that people are already, I don't want to say skipping, but missing.
And we had that exact conversation. And when we took that into consideration, we also looked at April 21st. That would be that Monday after Easter. So we tried to put it up against where there was some kind of break, thinking about where families might be traveling to ease some of that. But if the board would prefer to go with the March date, we could go that route too.
Well, I don't want to just step in and dictate what a committee came up with. It's just I just know a lot of families, including staff, appreciate having time on Friday before spring break because they're traveling. But
Isn't that already, isn't the 21st?
it's not.
April 18th is the Friday before Easter, which is a paid holiday for a number of our employee groups. So I just want to put on the radar that if that were to be shifted and it becomes a school day, we would need to do something with regard to the holiday that they're entitled to. I just want to make sure the board knows that piece.
No, that's a good point, and that's why I asked why it was that day, because maybe that answers it. Maybe that's a good enough reason that it would be that day and not March 21st. Because March 21st, Pat, you asked if that's a day that's a half day for elementary, but it's still a full day for secondary students and a full day for all staff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
that Friday before spring break.
Which is at the end of the quarter too.
Yes.
So teachers are usually trying to get grades taken care of before they go off for spring break.
Yeah.
Got a
And
couple of
record
questions.
keeping. Yeah.
Having put schedules together for over 20-some years, I'm looking at this and I see that we have 11 professional development days and just questions. You know, that's what you get a lot of when the calendar comes into play. I'm looking at only 173. We look at the secondary level, you look at it a little bit differently than you do at the elementary level. Because
Correct.
you can add minutes here and there at the elementary level. You miss a day at the high school and middle school situation, you're missing an instructional period for all practical purposes. You just can't add minutes on at that level. It just is a different way of dealing with it. But I know the DPI does that all the time.
Right.
And I used to always get in a little bit of a complaint with them about, but contact time. You got your AP classes, you got your IB classes, you got all of that. And when you lose contact time, that's tough. That's tough on those classes, those high-end classes, or any classes for that matter. So I'm just looking at 173 contact days. That's all we have at the middle and secondary level?
Correct. And the DPI used to have a requirement of 175 days. They did away with that and they only consider the instructional minutes themselves. So to your point, elementary has a set level and then our middle and high schools do too. So DPI says as long as we meet those minute requirements and by adding the 4 minutes, we meet them, but then we also exceed the minute thresholds. And what you'll see in the next slide too is that this calendar has 3 traditional snow days built in as well.
Seriously.
Yeah, so
Wondering about that.
yeah, so the calculation, what I did is I factored in those 3 days to make sure that we are still meeting those minutes and then some, should we need all 3 snow days.
And by the way, the history goes back where not only was it 175 days of contact time, but it was at one time 180 days of contact time, which I always fought for because of the fact of the high-end classes. Now you're losing those contact days, and that's very important. I'm also, it's all just statements that I'm giving you. But the next comment is, looking at 11 professional days, is that pretty much what we've had in the past, where we've had 11 professional development days?
We actually have more now. One thing that we have continuously heard from a majority of staff and something that really spurred us to look into independent learning days was a need and a request for more consistent and ongoing opportunities for collaboration amongst their colleagues and professional development. So we really wanted to be cognizant of that and try to fit in some more days. So this school year, we have 8 professional development days within the school year itself. And then in this calendar, there would be 7. And that is after the first day of school and before the end of the school year, not taking into account the 4 days in August.
Well, another comment from the administrative point of view and also from the teacher point of view, I'm wondering about teachers have a lot to do at the very beginning and at the end and throughout the year. Questions always come up about, is that in-service, is that professional development day going to be worth my time? Or is it just going to be me checking off a box that I'm in a professional development? Are they getting that time that they need with their PLCs and others so that they can make sure they get their work done that they need to get done, and it's not a central office directive? And I don't mean to put pressure on the central office, but I do know as a teacher for so many years in the district, I used to wonder, why are we doing all this when I could get into my PLCs or I can get in with my teammates?
And I'm wondering if anyone in our education team has anything to add to help answer some of that I'm not.
Sure. It's a great question, and yes, with the, we're really trying to balance the time between, professional development and professional learning. That goes along with some of our, standards and curriculum with balancing that time, especially this year. We got a lot of great feedback from those independent learning days with collaboration with peers around, necessary elements with PLCs and departments at all levels. So maintaining, those days for staff, I think, is something that they definitely wanted and would like to continue. And balancing that time between training and collaboration time. It's all professional learning, but both are equally important. So yes, I would say
Right.
yes.
Well, and understand, I'm asking those questions because of the fact that I'm also a person that, like I said, dealt with 180 and at one time 185 contact days, and now we're seeing them come down in contact days, and we added more professional development, just as long as we're making sure there's enough time for teachers to do what they need to do.
I think one thing that helps with those in-service days before their school year starts is not having them run all the way up to that Friday. That, I don't know when we made that change, but that's been very well received to have Thursday and Friday, or at least Friday off, which for many teachers isn't actually off. They're in the school working, but at least they're, they have that day to get in there and get ready.
Agreed.
One question, I appreciate the 3 traditional snow days. I know that will be well received by both staff and families, I think. But that added 4 minutes, what does that look like? So there's 4 more minutes added on to what?
So
Homeroom to period 1?
So we move the bell schedule up those 4 minutes. So the end of the school day would still be the same. And I don't know if our education department friends have anything to add for that about what that
So they're just in the building 4 minutes longer with the bell having rung?
Under instruction, like instruction would begin at that time, like it does now. And we looked at, do we add them to the end of the day? And one thing first student said is that would kind of create a snowball effect in that, so they would get to the secondary schools 4 minutes later. That would push into the elementary bus route schedules. And then if that runs behind, then any evening activities that would require any kind of busing would be impacted as well. So that's why they suggested the morning. So 4 minutes earlier instruction would start.
So can I ask, I mean, I know we're starting a little later and ending a little later, and my guess is, maybe this is wrong, to assume that that allows for a little bit more time with all the construction that's happening. Is that right? And it's not? So is this a change that we're gonna, this 4 minutes that's added is just because of the other changes that we've made to the calendar, which might continue ongoing?
Yeah, so the added professional development, the independent learning days, turning those just into professional development days takes away some instruction. So that's where we lose our minutes. So, and staff have said we want to maintain that professional development. So that's where the requirement to add those 4 minutes at the secondary level comes into play, because we need to meet that threshold. We have looked at starting again before Labor Day. However, DPI is really cutting back on the number of waivers that they grant now, if they grant any at all. So just being mindful of that, we went ahead and started after Labor Day.
But everybody, when you have a chance, and to our legislative liaison, it sure would be nice if the state would allow some local control to decide for themselves when the best day is to start the school year, as opposed to dictating to us the day that the school year has to start.
You don't even have to go to legislation and push for that because of the fact that it's been a fight in the state of Wisconsin for a long time, especially up north because of tourism. And that I remember pushing to go way into August because of the fact that all the athletic programs start in the first week of August. Why not start school at that time and then be done in May with school and with your AP and IB tests being done? They're done in the last couple of weeks of May, and those students are trying to find time to do something. Or actually, the teachers are trying to find time, but the tests are already taken. So it would be nice. A lot of parochial schools in the state of Wisconsin are doing that, but we are still hamstrung by the legislature to start on September 1st. Because
So you're
of
saying
tourism.
private schools that receive public funding?
I'm not going to go down that
Is that what
road,
you're
but
saying?
that's what I'm saying.
Oh.
I'm just saying what they have.
So I just think I'm all for the professional development days, and I know that's really important for our staff, and so I'm very supportive of that. But it does bother me a little bit to pretend that 4 minutes at the beginning of the day is increased instructional time. It's really not increased instructional time. I mean, I think we just need to be honest about what that really is. And maybe that's the same thing of the independent learning days as well, which might have been the feedback that you received anyway.
Right.
Was not really either considered instructional time, though it counted as instructional time. And now we've removed that because of the feedback that was received from staff and families
Correct.
as well. But I just think that's worth noting.
Well, I agree. I don't think the 4 minutes makes a huge difference, but I don't think having the independent days did either. And I think it took away from the professional learning from the teachers, who then had to not only prepare for that, but then deal with the fact that it often wasn't followed, and so there was all the catch up anyway. So I think it's just a question of whether or not you think that the professional learning days for the teachers is worth it.
Right.
Like that's
Right.
how many of those days do you want?
Well, Mr. Sillers, I will turn to you as our representative to the legislature and also to maybe CISA 9, so you can talk about this with DPI, because DPI directs the number of minutes that have to be done, and the legislature has control of when we start and when we don't start. So good discussion, because calendar's not easy. Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, I appreciate that. It's not easy, and for all the others that have worked on it. But we want to make sure we're using our time as wisely as we possibly can. So that's why we ask questions. Okay, anything else? Anything else?
Not at this time, unless anyone has any further questions.
I don't think so. I think we asked you enough questions as it is.
That's okay. I don't mind.
Unless you're asking and begging for more questions, we can ask those questions.
If you
All
have
right.
them, send them my way.
All right, so I got to get back to where I'm at here. Yeah, where am I at? Okay. I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the 2024-2025 district calendar as presented.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Sorry to grill you like that. All right. Josh will share many of the key variables contributing to the district's multi-year financial projection model. The model represents a baseline using current information to which adjustments are subsequently made. The projection model uses budget numbers from the 2023-2024 district budget with percentages and/or dollar amounts cast forward, along with adjustments to create this baseline. Once these assumptions are built into the projection model, it will be presented to the board at a later date. So the process continues.
Yep, thank you, perfect. So, back to budget season. So exactly like Jim said, something we do every year. We use Frontline, I think formerly Forecast 5, to create a multi-year projection of our budget, both in terms of revenues and expenses. And these are the assumptions that we will feed into that model. So if you have feedback on these assumptions, please feel free to provide it, and we'll work from there. Obviously, our employees are a huge priority, and we take them into account when making these assumptions. I'd also like to note that we know the revenue limit will increase by $325 per pupil next year, and that is something like 2.67%. So anything you see over 2.67% is somewhere where we are spending more than we will be receiving next year in terms of an increase. So we'll have to spend less money in a different category. Any questions on that before I jump in? So looking first at expenditures and salary and then benefit assumptions, we assumed 3% across the board at this point for salary changes. This is just a starting point, just a baseline. It's important to note that CPI, I think this year it was finalized at 4.1. Last year it was somewhere around 8. So it came down significantly, but still pretty high. And then in terms of retirements and turnover, we know at this point that I think we have 24 retirements. So there will be a trade-off there where a newer teacher costs you less than a more experienced teacher, but you do, of course, lose that experience with the teacher walking out the door. So that's important to note. Then moving down to benefits, those top line items, those are known. And if that's a change, that's something we don't control. And then we move down to health insurance. In November, we had a plan change that went into effect in January, but our claims do continue to trend up. So we did put that 3% number in there at this point as a placeholder. And then there's an additional line. Just want to note that there could be additional plan changes or contribution model changes, anything like that. So I wanted to note that to you. And then moving on to non-salary and benefit expenditure assumptions. So in the general fund, all of those things, we are expected to make no change at this point. At least that's what we're projecting. But as was noted in the capital budget presentation, things continue to cost more. So we are asking people to tighten their belts a little bit on that. And then moving down to utilities, we have 2% assumed for next year, 3% for the following year, and then 4% in the subsequent years. That 2% number is based on where we are year to date, how we're doing. So that's what we have there. Then transportation, this current year and then next year are the final years of our current contract with First Student. So we will be bringing RFP forward this spring. So we know that we're roughly around 2.5% for next year for an increase, but then projected 5% going forward in subsequent years. And there's a chance it could be more than that. So,
Josh, that was one of my questions is, 5% is great. It looks nice as a placeholder, but it's not realistic based on everything that we've seen and heard, just industry wide. Is there any advantage to keeping the 5 where it is?
You're probably correct in that we could see a larger increase. I don't know that we will, but I don't know how the bids will come in, but it's possible that we could see a larger increase. And when we start looking at those subsequent years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the model in the next couple of meetings, it may be important to increase that. So if that's something you'd like to do, I'm totally on board with that.
No, so our current contract ends next year?
So it goes
June?
through June of 2025.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
So the first 3% there is really the only, the 2.5%.
That's the known.
That's the only one locked in.
That's the only known, exactly.
Those next 4 years are all hypotheticals of a new contract.
Right.
Okay.
And that's good feedback to take into account, with rising transportation costs. So
I hope you're right.
Well, I think it's good to be realistic, but you don't want to be aggressive with it either. We don't want to advertise, hey, by the way, we're already budgeting for 10%. So
that's the other side
when you
of
make
that
your
coin.
bid,
Yes.
And the RFP process will start soon, and we're hoping to have the next contract in place by this summer. Am I correct?
Yeah, the last time we went through this, we had someone approved, I think either in June or July. So it'd be nice if we could follow that same timeline. That would give them a year to work behind the scenes, whoever it is, and then we'd know for budgeting purposes. So
Josh, can we go back? The water and the sewage charges, is that basically a average for the district? Because obviously Wausau has increased some of their rates. And if you aren't aware of it, the Metro sewage that takes care of Rothschilds and Red Mountain has also already increased the sewage side. And then in 25, Red Mountain will begin their water plant. And then there'll be a rate increase for water because of that. So just things for you to
that's good
be
feedback.
aware
Thank you. I
of.
appreciate that. To take that into account moving forward. Any other questions before I keep moving down the page? In district insurance, that's just about the average that we've experienced, so that's what's factored in there at this time. Fund 27, non-salary and benefit, we're not expecting to see any changes there. Fund 50, the only change we're projecting, that 2% increase you see, is in non-capital objects or food. So that's about where we're trending for next year. And then nothing in Fund 80 at this point. Any questions on those? We just have a couple manual adjustments. We have the open enrollment tuition net expense increase. What we're seeing is a leveling off of the gap between open enrolled in and open enrolled out. So that $5,000 number you see reflected there, that's a placeholder for that flattening of that gap. And then we have the voucher program, projecting a 10% increase year over year. Any questions on those two? Okay, revenue assumptions. We have the $325 that we talked about. One thing I did want to note for other revenue assumptions is the investment income. That is not referendum specific investments. That's just our general money that is invested. So we're having right now this year a good year, but it's a very small number. So you'll see a 50% increase for next year. And then we're going to start dialing that back because we're having a banner year this year. We'll probably end up something like 200% of budget. But again, it's a very small number. So that 50% increase is not a large dollar amount increase. And then we have the revenue limit exemptions. So those are the energy efficiency things that we did a couple of years ago. And we did the projects, now we have to pay them off, so we levy for them and then we pay them off. We only have a couple years of that left, and then that will fall off the levy. The other one I wanted to note is the ESSER funds that we are spending. This is the last real year of ESSER funding we have through September of next year, so there's a tiny little window in there. But you'll note that we have about $3.5 million of personnel cost in there. So those funds, if nothing's done with current staffing model, will have to move into the general fund. So
the ESSER money goes away, and we have used all of our ESSER money. Obviously, we have it until September to finish that up, but we are using it productively, correct?
We are using it productively, yep.
And we do have, and I've asked this before, but I just want to say it again, we do have the $3.5 million identified of personnel expense. So when that time comes, we know what was a net add prior to ESSER. So we don't have to.
I want to answer your question the best I can. We've identified the positions that were specifically added in response to the pandemic with ESSER funding and what can be done with those positions. And that is something I will bring before you in terms of the budget reconciliation plan.
Okay.
And all those employees knew that they were hired under ESSER money as well, so they knew it would run out eventually.
I was not here. I don't want to speak to the language that was communicated to those employees.
Probably a rhetorical question. Okay. No answer for it.
So then we have the Fund 80 levy that will stay the same. It stayed the same the last couple of years. And the special education aid reimbursement percentage will stay at that 33%. Any questions on this?
No? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Appreciate the information. Agenda item 9. The Montessori Charter School received school board approval to expand to grades 4K 8th grade. There is a federal charter school grant through DPI that is available to support Wisconsin charter schools expansion costs, and we are seeking approval to apply for this grant to help support the costs associated with the expansion, such as training and professional development, curriculum and resources, equipment, and expanded learning experiences. These opportunities will enhance the learning for all students and staff at the Montessori Charter Schools. So I turn it over to you two ladies.
Here, go ahead. Good evening. Thank you. We have an exciting opportunity for us at the Montessori Charter School, and Head of School Elizabeth Channel is going to talk to you a little bit more about it, as Ms. Boucher introduced.
Yes, so back in June of 2022, you all approved for our Montessori Charter School to move from a K-6 school to a 4K through 8th grade school. So for the fall 2022 school year, we added our first 7th grade class. Fall of 2023, we moved up to 8th grade, and this fall we will be adding our 4K, so we will be officially 4K through 8, so that is really exciting. We will have 18 open seats for 4K, and so we've talked through what that will look like. But this specific grant for DPI, they offer it on a 5-year plan. And so they typically take a break in between the 5-year cycles. So it was 5 years before, they took a break last year, and now it is back. I was very pleased to sit through a webinar with DPI where they explained the expectations for the grant. They're looking for high quality charter schools, so that is per DPI standards. So they're looking for schools that are charter that have met or exceeds expectations in the time that they have been in existence. And then we are able to look for up to $500,000 for expansion. So for those of you that have had the pleasure of walking through our school, you have seen all of the materials that we have on the shelves. They are very expensive. They're all made out of wood. They're built to last for a while, but we have been in existence for 18 years. Some of those things are breaking down, and now we're expanding classrooms and all of that. So I'm just looking for ways to bring in more money into our district to kind of fund that. So we are looking at doing an expansion by size. Per DPI, we currently are a K-8 school, will be a 4K-8 school next year. And so when we're looking at the flow chart of opportunities, the expansion by size is what we're looking at. So we're looking at gaining 20 students each year for this five-year grant. DPI materials are due very soon. So there's an very expansive list of appendices that we have to fill out. We have 6 sections to fill out for the first half, and then if you're in expansion, there's another 2 sections. So I'll be working with Julie Schell on getting all of that done, and there's a lot where we have to show how we are have an autonomous governance council and what they do and how they're involved in what the community needs and how we're a great addition to our district. So that is what I'll be working on for the next 5 weeks.
You'll be busy.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we can go to the next one. Thank you. So yes, we're recommending to the full board the approval of the Montessori Charter School to apply for federal charter grant through Wisconsin DPI that would provide funding for the previously approved school board expansion of grades 4K through 8th grade.
Seeking a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions?
I just had a confirming question. Is this part of the Wisconsin Resource Center for Charter Schools? Is this the same group?
No, so they are the ones who are providing information about it, but it's a federal grant that is coming through DPI.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm seeking a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now. Okay. Hang with me. we'll start this here. I'm calling to order a special meeting for January 22nd, requesting a closed session pursuant to state statutes. The board will convene into closed session under Wisconsin statutes 1985 1F to discuss and consider investigation of an employee matter which, if discussed in open session, would likely have substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of the individuals involved, and which involves the confidential student information protected by Wisconsin Statute 118.125. First of all, I'm seeking a motion here. I need a roll call.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay. And roll call.
Okay. Pat McKee?
Yes.
Cody Nicolai?
Yes.
Jennifer Paoli?
Yes.
Corey Sillers?
Yes.
Lance Trollop?
Yes.
Karen Vandenberg?
Yes.
Jim Boucher?
Yes.